Well, did you read it? Did you read it today? I did. All over the news today, they were saying, print the indictment and read it for yourself. 37 pages, I think? 37 pages. There's the indictment handed down today by Robert Mueller, charging 13 Russians, one of which I believe lives or maybe lived in the USA, with interfering with conspiring and interfering with the United States election system. I want to read the beginning of this. Operations to interfere with the U.S. political system, including the 2016 U.S. presidential election. There's a lot in here. I'm not going to cover it all. 37 pages. If you didn't read it, I'll give you some of what I picked out of it. I highlighted some things with green, and these are all the flags that I have on there of all the things worth taking note of. Operations included supporting the presidential campaign of then candidate Donald J. Trump. Some people are going to say, "Oh, this is fake news, just more fake news. That's why we can't trust Robert Mueller. This is the work of Bill and Hillary Clinton." This is an indictment handed down, a legal indictment. You can't blame this one on Bill and Hillary Clinton. Communicated with unwitting individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Now, there's something that was added about that. Because, yes, some of these individuals, at least the ones they're talking about in this indictment, may have been or maybe probably were unwitting. They didn't realize who they were communicating with. But as someone brought out, Trump started off by saying, vindicated. See, it proves that he was not involved because he wasn't named in it. And how did they put that? They said absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because someone was not named in this indictment doesn't mean they're cleared of all charges or suspicion. They could be named in a future indictment. This involves these 13 Russians and only them right now. Even mentions in there 3 campaign officials with whom these people communicated in one way or another, but it just names them as candidate, as well, I'll get to that. It just gives them a number. It doesn't give any names. Knowingly and intentionally conspired. This is what they did. Knowingly and intentionally conspired to defraud the United States by impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of the Federal Election Commission. And this is a word that I have been using for a long time because they're saying on TV, was there collusion? Was there collusion? Collusion isn't against the law. They don't use collusion here. Conspiracy, conspired, because that's really the crime here. What else did I highlight in this huge document? Some of this was really worth reading. Object of the conspiracy. See, there it is again, conspiracy. The conspiracy had as its object impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful governmental functions of the United States by dishonest means in order to enable the defendants to interfere with U.S. political and electoral processes, again, including the 2016 U.S. presidential election. See, this is the part that Trump's going to have a lot of problems with because he doesn't want anyone to prove that he was not legitimately elected by the people to be the president of the United States. He didn't win the popular vote, but yes, he won the Electoral College vote. That's what matters. The popular vote is nothing but an opinion poll anyways. It's like an official opinion poll. It doesn't really count for anything other than it tells the electors in the Electoral College who they should vote for. It's kind of a skewed system. Someone can win 51% of the popular vote in a state, but they get 100% of the Electoral College votes in that state. So it's not really it's not an accurate system, but it's the official system. We accept it. Okay. Other things worth noting in this indictment. By 2016, the size of many, and they put in capital letters, organization-controlled groups had grown to hundreds of thousands of online followers. That's where they were able to change the outcome of the election, or at least influence the vote. They use the word organization because there's a big long name of what the organization is. So they just threw out the indictment. After they named what the organization was, they just said from here on in, known as the organization. By 2016, the size of many organization-controlled groups had grown to hundreds of thousands of online followers. These were people who wanted to be told that Hillary Clinton should be locked up, wanted to be told that she and Bill were rigging the election or something. And they still think that way. They still believe that way. So these Russians knew how to manipulate the people through advertisements, through communications. It goes into how far they went, including stealing identifications in order to communicate with Americans, especially in places like Florida, right, battleground states, to either get them to stay home so they wouldn't vote at all, the minorities, because they typically vote Democratic, or to get them to vote against Hillary Clinton. And there was a lot that they did as far as not just advertisements and messages and creating groups on Facebook and so forth, but actually organizing rallies in some of these places. Use of U.S. computer infrastructure to hide their Russian identities. They purchased space on computer servers located inside the United States in order to set up virtual private networks so that people wouldn't know that they were being communicated from Russia. I get email once in a while. You could help me out. I have $20 million I need to bring into the United States. If you'll help me bring this in, I'll give you 10% of it. Sure, but it ends with a .ru. And if you communicate, I don't, but I've heard how it works. If you communicate with them, they say, well, just to let me know that you're reliable, send me $1,000 as a cover, just to keep things safe, so that I know you're serious. And then you never hear from them again. They got your $1,000, they're gone. I did that one time. I communicated. They said, all we need is your bank account, your number, the bank where you bank, you do your banking, your account number, and your PIN, and we'll transfer the money into your bank account. Well, once they get your PIN, they got your money. So I wrote back and I said, I got a better idea. You give me your bank account, your bank, your PIN number, I'll transfer the money, and I guarantee you I'll keep it for you. I never heard from them again. This was a good one. Using U.S. email, use of stolen U.S. identities. They used a lot of U.S. identities so that they could pretend to be an American citizen. And it's a name, it's a U.S. name. They've got social security number, they've got date of birth, they've got city and state where someone lives. They can use that to establish an account on Twitter or Facebook. It's amazing to what extent they went to do all this. It's amazing how far they went and how sophisticated they were. They engaged in operations primarily intended to communicate derogatory information about Hillary Clinton, to denigrate other candidates such as Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, and to support Bernie Sanders and then candidate Donald Trump. They wanted to make sure Hillary Clinton wouldn't win because she was in favor of keeping the sanctions against the Russians. So, again, there's where I mentioned that earlier. They tried to get people to boycott the elections. It's so unfair that you should just stay home. You shouldn't vote at all. Destruction of evidence. They were very clear as far as once they started to get caught on how to wipe out email accounts, wipe out identities on Twitter and Facebook so they could cover what they were doing. Here's how they mention contacting a member of the Trump campaign. They just referred to them as campaign official 1, campaign official 2, campaign official 3. They didn't name who the names were, at least not yet. Now, these may have been unwitting. They may be innocent. They may not have known that Russians were communicating with them. But you can't tell me that, what's his name, the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, didn't know who he was communicating or whom he was communicating with when he met the Russians at Trump Tower to discuss adoption policies. When they said they had dirt on Hillary Clinton, and do you want some? And he said, yeah, would love to have that. So that's most of what's there. They talk about the laws that were broken. They give the actual numbers. And again, how sophisticated they were. The extents that they went through to really influence the outcome of this election. And you got to wonder why. What had Trump promised them or indicated he would do for them? Did they have something over him? Because he's been in Russia. He's tried to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. His son admitted that they were getting money from Russia to fund some of their like golf courses and so forth, because Donald Trump had declared bankruptcy so many times and had defaulted on his loans that no American banks would loan him money. So there's obviously a lot of connection there. And I can't help but wonder why. Why is this all going on? There were a few things that were mentioned on the news today in relation to this. One of which, and I thought this was important, this indictment now effectively ends the Trump narrative that the Russian conspiracy is a hoax. It's not a witch hunt, folks. It's not a witch hunt. It's not a hoax. They have an indictment now, unless you want to believe that this is fake news, which some of you will. Again, tell me so in the comments to this video. I guarantee you I won't respond. I don't care. This in print means more to me than your opinion about that. Another point, the president is concerned because, and I mentioned this earlier, it adds weight to the claim he was not legitimately elected to be the president of the United States. He can't tolerate that. That drives him nuts. That keeps him awake at night, makes him wake up early in the morning and start tweeting. Someone else mentioned this shows true fake news in action. The Russians created fake news aimed at a political candidacy with a political agenda to control the outcome. That's what they said on the news today, that they were the creators of fake news. And they did. Some of the things they came up with against Hillary Clinton. I mean, one of them that I remember is like a child porn ring that was run out of a pizza parlor somewhere. Yeah, like that's true. Some want to believe that. Some people love conspiracy theories. A friend of mine, former friend of mine, he's not a friend, hasn't been a friend in like 6-7 years. He came to me one day. There was information in the news about something called colony collapse disorder or hive collapse disorder. There were problems in beehives, honey beehives, where the colony would all of a sudden fail. The workers would leave, they would abandon the queen, the remaining bees would die without workers to take care of them. And so it was affecting not only the honey industry, but it was affecting agriculture in the United States. For example, here in California, up north, there are a lot of almond trees. Well, they need bees to pollinate the flowers so they can get the fruits from which they can get their almonds. If the bees collapse, they don't have the bees to pollinate the flowers, we don't end up with almonds. So this former friend came to me and he said, I think I've heard that the Republicans are causing this hive collapse syndrome, or this, whatever it's called, colony collapse disorder, in order to damage the honey industry, and then they're going to blame it on the Democrats. Yeah. And behind the Russians are the Martians. I mean, come on. But people love conspiracy theories. I was in a news group where we would meet every other week to discuss current events in the news. And we had to be very careful with some people in the group because they didn't want to talk about what was in the news. They wanted to talk about their favorite conspiracy theories. And we had to tell them, we're not interested in conspiracy theories. If you don't have it from the New York Times or the Washington Post or the National Review or something like that, then it's not news. It's just simply conspiracy theory, and we're not interested in conspiracy. But they love talking about conspiracy theories. Now there is evidence that members of the Trump campaign who communicated, maybe unwillingly, with Russian conspirators really did do that. When Trump said, oh, there's been no collusion, now there's evidence of not only collusion, but communication and attempt to conspiracy. As I mentioned, some people want to believe in these conspiracy theories, but it's hard to argue against something like this. Some will. They'll claim this is fake news. They'll say, well, this is the reason why we need to get rid of the FBI, or we need to change the FBI because they're out to get Trump. Let's believe whatever you want to believe. I myself think that Robert Mueller and the people who are working with him are seasoned investigators that know what they're doing. They've been around for a long time. And if they were to pull stunts trying to sabotage the President of the United States, they would just be caught. They would be caught and tried for treason. That's all. It's just not going to happen. It's like believing George W. Bush was behind the destruction of the World Trade Center. That's another one. Anyways, this was in the news today, and as I mentioned at the outset, they said, print this up. Everybody should read this. And the reason why they say we should read this is they're trying to tell us as Americans, be careful where you get your news sources. If you only like to find out what the headlines are in your favorite group on Facebook or Twitter, you may be getting propaganda. It may sound good. It may appeal to your ego. You may like it in some way. Ooh, this is really going on. Ooh, that's spectacular. That's sensational. Get your news from reliable news sources and from as many different news sources as possible. And compare notes. Compare notes to see who's telling you what. If there's a contradiction there between what one news journalist is telling you and what another news journalist is telling you, try to resolve the contradiction. Who's telling the truth and who's lying and why? Who were they serving? So I thought it was a good read. It didn't put me to sleep. I didn't read it cover to cover all at once. I took my time, read it a section at a time, but it took most of the day because I read it kind of slowly because I didn't want to miss anything either by rushing through it. And you can see I took a lot of notes. So that's what I wanted to talk about in my vlog. I haven't done a vlog in a while. I just didn't have anything worth talking about, but this really inspired me. So that's my vlog for today. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. And thanks for listening.